Hello, hello, everybody, lovely people of LinkedIn and YouTube. So, we recently started streaming this LinkedIn Live also to the YouTube channel. So, feel free to go check that out. It's easier to find old interviews there. But here we are. It's not Monday, it's Thursday. We had a little bit of technical difficulty on Monday. We overcame it, and voila. With me, it's my friend Jerry. Jerry, without me going into too much random rambling like I'm known to do, welcome to the show. And I would absolutely love for you to tell us a little bit about you, introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure, Mihai, and I obviously appreciate you having us on today. I'm in Portland, Oregon. I was born and raised out here in Oregon. I am seven of nine children. I'm number seven. My parents had six kids when they were 22 years old. I grew up about as poor as you can. Stole food as a kid to eat. Started my own business many years later at 28, and now 22 odd years later, we've done about $500 million in revenue over those years, and I bought and sold, a dozen companies from transportation, gas stations, car washes, real estate, both commercial, development, home building. Jack of all trades, went anywhere I thought I could make money. Many places I couldn't. I had to learn that the hard way, and some places I could. So that is my background in a 1 minute nutshell.
Well, I can see that you do a lot of interviews, Jerry, to be able to say your story so quickly. But, your story is just so fascinating. I don't want us to go so quickly through it because your story is full of ups and downs and opportunities, and you being able to grab those opportunities and, whenever you could use them for the best.
Right.
And that is the topic of today's interview. It's about seizing the opportunity when the opportunity presents itself, being open to seeing the opportunities, because sometimes we go on that hamster wheel and we don't see the opportunities because we are chasing that one deal, instead of letting maybe it go and opening ourselves up to other opportunities. So I want you to go on a longer version of that story and walk us through with the opportunities and how you were able to grab them.
When you come out of let me back up. I don't subscribe to the theory that do what you love. I don't ever tell anybody that. I wouldn't counsel anybody about doing what you love. I tell people that want to be successful to take advantage of opportunities, because when you come from where I come from, when you come from a very poor background, I got my first job when I was 11 years old. I paid taxes as an 11-year-old at a restaurant where I washed dishes. And between 11 years old and 28 years old, I probably had 25 jobs because I would just move to the next job that I thought I could make more money at. So as those opportunities presented themselves, I didn't stay at one job longer than maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and then I had gained experience, and I was able to take that experience and go on to another job that paid me more. And I did that till I was 22 years old when I finally settled down and worked for the same company for 6 or 7 years before I went and started my own. And the thing about opportunities is when you're from the streets. When I was 17 years old, I lived in a on Skid Row in a $25 a week. We'll call it a hotel room with hookers and heroin addicts. But I always went to work, and so the opportunities. When you're living that lifestyle, you don't look at it and go, well, one day I'm going to be an interior designer because that's what I want to be. You don't look at it and go, what makes me happy is doing this thing, and so I'm going to pour all of my effort into doing this thing, like we hear so many business gurus talk about. The other thing that we hear business people gurus talk about that I disagree with is do what you're good at. Right. Well, when you're from the street, you're trying to work your way up, and you're trying to just survive. And when I was a kid, my little brother, I have a little brother's 20 months younger than me. We stole food regularly as kids to eat. when you survive like that and you figure out how to survive like that, what you quickly realize is what you're not good at is what's going to get you in trouble. And so what you want to do and what I did is I just concentrated on what I wasn't good at, because what I'm good at takes care of itself. I didn't have to worry about it, and I would get better at it. And the more the more introspective I was, the more self-aware I was of what I was not good at. I was then able to hone those skills, which ultimately allowed me to take advantage of literally every opportunity that I came across. And so that background that I come from, again, very violent. I've seen multiple murders within 20 feet as a kid, multiple suicides, 500 fights. I come from a very violent background. But what it teaches you is to just keep your head up. And I kind of was able to steer clear of drugs. I was able to steer clear of alcohol. And I had a work ethic that was second to none. And I was able to put that work ethic out there and then ultimately have it pay off by taking advantage of whatever opportunity business-wise that came along.
Well, we already discussed this a few times on the podcast, on your podcast, and so on. How my story is the complete opposite of your story. And I was the lazy one and the privileged one, and coming from this super privileged childhood and so on. So tell us a little bit more, when you're coming from that situation, when you're seeing what you saw, how do you even, maintain that hunger and not just, give in and go into the gang life, or, how doesn't that grab you? And how were you able to find the energy to move? Like, what was your making money, there's a whole lot of different ways to make money. And if you're used to that street life, there are easier ways, like stealing and so on. Like, what kept you on that right course?
I think what kept me on the right course, for the most part, was that I, and to the answer to both of your questions, I think this is a little self-serving, this answer, but I had a little bit more common sense than the average kid that I grew up with. I was sure of myself through and through, and so I had a little bit of more common sense, and probably maybe a couple of extra IQ points that I could blend together, that made it so that I could read the side of a cigarette pack and it said, "Don't smoke this; it'll kill you," and I just wasn't going to smoke it. Don't drink this, it's bad for you, Mothers Against Drunk Driving and all of those things. And I saw what happened to my friends when they got drunk, and I said, I'm not going to do that. I saw what drugs did, again, living with heroin addicts. I saw what the street could do to you, on an almost daily basis. But as a kid, stealing food to eat, always being hungry, when I was 11 years old and I got that first job, one of the greatest meals I ever had was that I could pick the meal that I wanted off of the menu at the end of the day. Now, Mija, I would have worked the whole day for that meal. The fact that they paid me $3 an hour was just cake on top of it, because I would have worked for that meal. And so the first meal I ever ate from a restaurant, I bought myself essentially by working the day, and they gave me that meal. And from that point forward, work and food went together. So that's really work and survival. And so my mindset from the very earliest days was, you just go to work. There's no question about going to work. So I had enough common sense to steer clear, for the most part, of kind of the worst parts of the street, and I had the work ethic that sent me to work every day. And then I got lucky. I've been in jail multiple times, but never enough to keep me in there a long time. And I tell this story, and I'll tell it really quick. I was introduced in the 7th grade to a Christian youth pastor. And this guy became like a dad to me, took really good care of me. I ended up living with him for about 9 months, him and his family. They took me in, and I was a bit of a punk, and ultimately I ran my welcome out But in the time that I spent with this guy for maybe 18 months, he showed me what a real family could look like. He taught me some morality. He taught me, by his example and stories about what life can look like. It can look like the life that you see on television, because that's what he had, and it was a life I never had experienced, I had never seen before. And so I watched that, and on two separate occasions, I was at a point in my life where I had somebody under my boot on the ground, and my foot was in the air and it was going to come down. And I had Jiminy Cricket, my conscience, Buddha, God, something on my shoulder said, "Don't do it. You've done enough." Right? If you're done here. If you go this extra step, you're going to be in prison for the rest of your life. You'll probably be dead. It's just a whole next level. And so I was smart enough to listen to that voice that I had gained by having this relationship with this youth pastor in my 7th and 8th grade years, and it really helped kind of guide me, if you will, over the next decade, steer clear of the worst parts of the street.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I get that. I understand that. So if we now a little bit fast forward, I think if I caught it right, you were 28 when you decided to become an entrepreneur. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. So you've started multiple different things. You seized different opportunities. Can you walk us a little bit through? See me?
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
We're back. Something happened with the stream, but we are back now, I believe.
yep.
Yeah. So, can you walk us a little bit through those opportunities, through those? How did you recognize them? How did you decide which ones to take, which ones not to take? Maybe an example of a failed one and a really successful one. So let's talk a little bit about that entrepreneurial journey.
So when I went from about 22, 23 to 28, I ran a company for somebody, and I did very well running it operationally. And at 28, I got approached by other people in the business between Portland and Seattle to start up a company, and they sent me a pro forma. And so I'm sitting there, and I ran operations for this big outfit, and people twice my age were working for me. And honestly, Miha, I was a nightmare then. I don't know how I had any friends, to be honest with you, because I was pretty full of myself, being who I was. And I had these paperwork in front of me. And it had all of these numbers on it. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what a pro forma was. I didn't know what a balance sheet or a P&L was. I bought my first house when I was 21 years old. I didn't know what an interest rate was. Literally, I didn't know how that math worked. I didn't know what a refi was. I had no idea. I was a pure street kid, so I had no idea how any of these things work. I tell you that before I tell you stories about entrepreneurs, because you don't need to have that classic background to look at and find these opportunities. It doesn't have to be that way, that way that it's kind of shown to us on television. In fact, most people that I know don't have that background. So I certainly didn't have that background. I have no training, no schooling, none of those things. Everything I did, I learned on the fly. So to answer your question, I'm sitting there staring at this paperwork. I had no idea what I was looking at, and I had an epiphany. And the epiphany was, you don't know what you're looking at. You better shut up and listen. You think you know everything, but the reality is the world is this big out in front of you. You live in this little tiny world, and if you're not careful, you're going to be 50 years old still doing the same thing for relatively the same salary, just like so many that have come before you. So I looked at that and I was like, I got to shut up and listen. I got to find people smarter than me. I got to find people that know more than I do. I got to stop hanging out with the friends that I had in sports and sports bars and playing sports. And I need to get serious about what I'm doing with my career. And so it was really that epiphany that I had. That then opened up a world of people that I had access to, or that I found access to, that as deals came up, I was able to talk to them about what did this deal mean. So my first deal, we opened up my job. I was financed, so a group of people came in and funded me. And I ran all of the operations, all the sales. I ran the company. They did the financing. We had an idea of what it was going to do. And in my first year, Miha, starting from scratch, I did two. The phone rang 4 times my first day. I came out of this super busy office, started my own company, and the phone rang 4 times the first day, and twice it was my mother calling to see how business was. So, I mean, that was the start. We did 2 orders that first day, and I ran that company to $3 million in its first year. And at the end of the first year, the people who invested in me, who I had told this was what I was going to do, didn't have the money that they said they do. And I don't have to tell you how expensive growth like that is, particularly on 30 and 45-day receivable turns, that you need cash to generate that kind of
Yes.
cash, and they just didn't have it. And so they came in and fired me 1 year almost to the date in February of 99. And I turned around and said, oh, that's fine. Now I've gained some new knowledge. Now I have an idea of how these things work. And I just turned around and essentially took that business back 2.5 weeks later, started another company from scratch that I was the owner of. And that company, we did $4 million the first year. We did $8 million the second year, $12 million the third year, and $14 million the fourth year. So we were off and running. And then I cut my teeth on business, ups and downs, and almost losing it half a dozen times, and refinancing my house multiple times to keep it afloat until I reached equilibrium probably 6 years in, 7 years in, somewhere around there. And then now I had all of this experience. I belonged to a CEO group, a mentor group. There was 10 or 12 of us, guys that were older than me and had been in business a lot longer. I listened. I sat back. I made sure I was the dumbest person in the room. I was quiet. I wanted to just absorb everything I could about business. I got Forbes magazine. I got Fortune magazine. I read every book I could find on business because, again, I have no education on it at this point. I'm learning on the fly. And so then I was like, hey, I see this business over here. That looks like a good business. So I take it to my network and say, guys, what do you think about this? I take it to attorneys, take it to accountants. I take it to my CEO group with all of this other experience. Tell me what's wrong with this. I'm happy to hear no. I'm happy to give me some really tough love here. If this is dumb, am I over my skis on this? And so I had that. I had those relationships that I had literally formed over that 5 to 8 years. That helped me then make decisions for each new business.
Jerry, I have to jump in. I just have to. This part is just so different from my story. Before our paths a little bit more merge. So when I was in my 20s, I was already running my businesses. I was the entrepreneur. Everything was handed over to me. I was just so cocky and so overconfident, and I thought I knew everything. I don't need lawyers, like I can go through a contract. I don't need advice from others. And that was my huge downfall. But with your life story, with everything you went through in your early stages and so on, and being the tough guy, like where did you find that humility to be humble and to shut up and listen? I mean, I know I'm going a little bit back to that epiphany, but I want to understand.
So, specifically, I don't know the answer to the question, but I answer that question this way. Those learned experiences. When I was 14 years old, I got jumped by 4 guys here in the southeast part of Portland, and they gave it to me pretty good. And they ended up robbing me. They rolled me, robbed me, put me underneath of a bench at a bus stop, and left me, essentially to die. This is the mid 80s. It's a whole different world. Then I woke up a couple hours later. I get out, I get on the bus, and I'm going to make my way home. And it's 2 buses and a 2-mile walk to home. Well, I pass out in between while I'm transferring from one bus to another. I have blood down my front. And I get down to my last bus and I get off of it, and now I have a 2-mile walk, and I'm going over a freeway and over a ramp that's a bridge that's still here in Portland. And anytime I go to this point, I remember this clearly. I can tell you the exact square of sidewalk I was standing on. Miha, I was holding my nose. They had broken my nose up here on top. And so I was holding, I have a little notch on it now, and I was holding it shut because it was just, it wouldn't stop bleeding. And my eyes were black. And I had an epiphany standing there holding. I stopped and it hit me. It's one of two epiphanies in my life. The first one or the other one I explained to you. And it said, no one's going to help you if you don't help yourself. When I got home, there was no one there. I sat in my bedroom for 3 days and held my nose shut until the little bone stopped sticking back up. So I just held it closed like this for 3 days until that bone stayed there. And that's what, passed for going to the hospital when I was a kid. And so, but that epiphany where it said, no one's going to help you. Every decision you make is going to either going to help or is going to hurt you, but you are responsible for every single one of them. So regardless of what anybody does to you, right or wrong, good or bad, it's your fault. So you take responsibility for everything, and then no one else will be responsible for what happens to your life, regardless of whether or not you did it. So I took that forward, and that kind of, as I matured and I got to 28, 29 years old, all of those lessons and all of those different things kind of coalesced together. All of those ingredients came together in that recipe, and I was able to start kind of picking from my hard drive, if you will, and start utilizing all of these experiences that I had had and all of these things that I had learned. And so kind of that humility comes from, or that humbleness comes from, being that person that doesn't care if I got any accolades. I never cared. I'll do your job, my job, the job of the person next to me. I'll come in on the weekends while you take the weekday off. I never cared what people think. I never cared what people did. I only cared about what I was capable of doing, and I never worried about what somebody else was doing. And so in doing that, just naturally, I think I just had that part of me that, we'll call it humility, but I legitimately didn't give two fucks what anybody thought about me.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, but that was such a smart thing to do because you took ownership of everything. I mean, and we talked about that before as well. The extremes that you take the ownership to.
Right.
Maybe if we dive a little bit into that, I mean, I think that is one of the most crucial skills, or I don't know how else to call it, of any CEO, any entrepreneur, any leader, is to take responsibility. And so little people take the responsibility, and even much fewer people take it to your levels of how much that extreme ownership you take.
Yeah, I think the extreme ownership comes from the things that really worked against me as a kid when I was, say, up through my early 30s, where I was just incorrigible. As I matured, they started to really benefit me. And I got some great advice one day that I really liked, which is that I have a huge ego. And my whole life I heard that huge egos are nothing but trouble and you shouldn't have a huge ego. And I disagree, because the huge ego its feelings can't be hurt. When you have a huge ego, you're so sure of yourself that your feelings can't be hurt. It's the small ego that gets you in trouble. It's the little ego guys that go around screaming and yelling at everybody and making sure that you know that they're the smartest person in the room, that you know that they're the ones that are in charge and that they know what they're doing. Big egos allow you to manage people, and the key to managing people is to get them to do what you want, let them think it's their idea. And so I never cared who got the accolades for it, because I know inherently what I did, what I'm capable of, and I didn't need anybody ever to pat me on the back. And so probably into my late 30s, maybe early 40s, I'm 51 now, I really started to figure this out. And you said skill, I call it a superpower. My
Yes.
superpower is that I don't care. And I take responsibility for everything. So when my guy crashes a truck into a bridge abutment for no reason other than, he made a mistake, I don't scream and yell about him. I don't get emotional about it. I go in, I analyze the problem. How did it happen? What can we do to fix it so it doesn't happen again? I can't turn time back. I've made 7-figure mistakes, 7 figures that I've lost on multiple occasions. And each one, I stop. I go, man, I screwed that up. Now, what did I do wrong? What can I do differently? How can I learn from that? And I go to the next one. There's no gnashing of teeth, jumping up and down. There's none of that because there's no money to be found being emotional, right? There's no money in emotion relative to running a business. And so that kind of analytical approach to business has obviously served me very well. And again, with that big ego that lets me just say, it was your idea. You did it. You figured it out. You get all the credit for it. Job well done, even though I did it all.
I couldn't agree more with you. Well, you said one thing just a minute ago, and all those things are the best lessons, the 7-figure mistakes. Would you care sharing maybe the biggest one, or the one that touched you the most, or was the biggest lesson for you, the biggest growth that you got from it? Because we need to share those
Sure.
stories, because other entrepreneurs can learn from our mistakes.
One of them is that, and it goes back to what I just said. In the early days, particularly businesses my size, you get sued. And so for particularly here in the States, anybody can sue you for anything. And what I figured out, and it took me a long time to figure out, that many of these lawsuits are just professional shakedowns. They sue you for $1 million, but they go away for $15,000. Well, the first time I got sued with any significance, I was like, I didn't do it. I'm not wrong. God damn it, I'm going to show them all, right? I'm going to prove that I'm not wrong. And that cost me mid 6 figures to defend myself. At court, at trial. I ended up losing half and winning half in a jury trial. The judge, because they don't ever force the people that sue businesses to pay, but they force businesses to pay. So the half I lost, I had to pay for, and the half I won, I got nothing for, and I had to cover the attorney fees on the other side. And so it turned into a high 6-figure, possibly low 7-figure. This has been 20 years ago. A very, very expensive lesson about what happens when you have success in business, and then when the wolves come for you, like they will, particularly here in the States, when the wolves come for you, what reality really is. And the reality is everything I've come across since then, for the most part, you just settle, regardless of how right you are. And I would argue that I've been right almost every time that I can remember. And I just, okay, yep, how much does he want? And they go away for pennies on the dollar relative to what they sue you for.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing when it comes to the US and doing business in US. It's hard for us Europeans to understand that particular part. I mean, we in the past, when I was younger, I know we often heard about things that if you are a producer of irons, you have to put on the label that you can't go under shower with the iron because somebody sues somebody and they won, and I don't know, like that for us Europeans was crazy.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of a shocker because we see US as the front runner, the where the invention happens and this mecca for entrepreneurship and all of that. But then on the other hand, you have this strange legal system where enormous amounts of money can be wasted, where, as you said, anybody can sue anybody. I mean, in Europe, even if I want to sue you, there are very big limitations on how much I can ask and how much the legal fees will be. The attorneys have, those court days and so on, but the numbers are very, very, very low compared to what I know from the US. So that's
Right.
always something we are a little bit okay.
Yeah, it's hard to understand. I believe the United States has more lawsuits per year filed than the rest of the world combined, and so it's a cottage industry here, and it's really a shakedown industry because you have attorneys that are working for whatever they're able to collect. So the plaintiffs aren't putting out any money. And they'll come after you, and again, they'll ask you for $1 million and say you're the worst, and your attorneys cost you $350 an hour. And so after that first lesson, it finally just became, all right, how much is this going to cost me? And I learned that they'd go away for $7,500. But imagine all they do is have to get somebody's name on a piece of paper. And then they can come after you, and you can defend yourself, but it's going to cost you $50,000, or you can pay $10,000 and they go away. It's really that simple for the majority. I think less than 1% go to trial in the United States. So most of it is handled this way, and I'm not going to say some of it is legit, but the large majority of it, in my experience with myself and 40 other businesses that I've been associated with and know about of significant size, will tell you the exact same story, that it's just professional shakedown. So I had to learn how that game was played in the United States in order to avoid losing 6 and 7 figures again.
Okay, yeah, I get it. Well, Jerry, we are coming, close to the end of this interview. And I mean, I know you have so many more stories to share, but yeah, everything what's good needs to come to an end. But I still have a few questions. So the question number one is, so far you've been sharing the business side of Jerry. But I know that our audience loves to get to know the person behind the business. So if there's anything, about you that you could share with us.
Personally, yeah, I have 3 kids, 23, 21, and 19. And as I was doing all of these work things, they're probably they are the proudest thing that I have in my life, and also how we were able to raise them is one of the things that I'm most proud about. I say about raising kids, Miha, that it's about quality, not quantity. And so often we talk about not getting to spend enough time with our kids, or I can't be successful, I can't put in the hours that are needed. I worked 15, 18 hours a day for 2 decades. And my kids are fantastic, and I couldn't be prouder of them if I tried. And it's all about making sure that you spend time with them, and that the time that you spend is their time, and it's quality time, not necessarily the number of hours. And so for me, my kids are just number one of the things I'm most proud of. Aside from that, I play pool. And so for me, I used to play basketball and sports, and I got too old. And so then pool took over, and I'm very good, and I'm really proud of how well I can play pool. I only have one eye. I have a million stories. I lost my eye when I was 14 years old. A virus ate my retina. My sister died when she was 13. I had an older sister died when I was 13 years old of a virus that got into her heart, and then I had a virus that 8 months later that got into my eyes and ate my eyes. And luckily, I was able to keep my left eye, but I blinded my right eye. So to be able to have vision as bad as mine is and still play pool at a pretty high level, I'm pretty proud of that. So that's what I do to relax. Though, is I try to play as competitive a pool as I can find. Billiards, I guess, for everybody in Europe.
Yeah, I
Did we lose you there? Well, there we go.
okay.
We're back.
Yes, I don't
Yes.
know what's happening with StreamYard today. This never happened to me before, but sometimes they just have a
We're
little.
snake bit trying to do this deal here. You and I were snake bit on this part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was one question.
Okay.
Now my second question is, how can people get in touch with you? How can people reach you? And is there anything that you're offering to the fellow entrepreneurial community?
So everything is at jerrybrazie.com. JerryBrazie. If you go to jerrybrazie.com, all of the social is under Jerry Brazie, and you can follow me there. Go to the Jerry Brazie podcast on YouTube, and I always tell anybody like and subscribe. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. They can go there. And the other thing that I always say to people is they can email me or just go to the website questions at jerrybrazie.com, and I'm happy to help, and I have many, many people around the country and around the world, from New Zealand to Southern California, that I have helped through this journey. Because this podcast for me that I do, the Jerry Brazie podcast, is all about trying to help other entrepreneurs who are trying to get started, and kind of the journey that I've been through, use that to maybe incentivize other people, show people what's possible, and at the same time help them out as much as I can. So if you got a question about how do you go from being a poor kid to making it, ask me. If you got a question about your business and how best to market it, ask me. If any of those questions, I only try to answer questions on things I know about. Obviously, you can tell I'm passionate about it, but I really try to stay in my lane and talk about those things that I've experienced, or I've known people who have experienced, and I've been a part of it, and then just dispense whatever advice I can give from that perspective. So I guess what I want to have taken away from this is I'm happy to help. If somebody would like help, reach out to me, and I think you'll be surprised, as many people have, that you'll actually get to me and we can have a conversation, and to the extent that I can, I'll try to do my best to give you some good advice and maybe save you from making the same mistakes that I have.
Well, that's absolutely amazing. I mean, you giving your time and the value away. So like kudos on that, Jerry. So now my last question. What would be that last golden nugget of wisdom that, before you and I say goodbye for this interview, what's that last golden piece of advice that you really want the audience to take home?
There are cliches in the world that are cliches for a reason, and I think these things get ignored because they become cliche. And one of them, as an example, and we talked about this earlier, is just not letting things bother you. Take responsibility for your own life. It's nobody else's fault that you are where you are. I say I am who I am because of where I come from and in spite of where I come from. And so many people, particularly in today's society, everything is everybody else's fault. And there's just no value in that. That won't get you anywhere. When you're standing at the water cooler and you feel yourself commiserating with those other employees about how the boss is such an asshole, recognize that there's no value in that whatsoever. Pull yourself away from it and just go back to work and keep your head down. And people aren't out to get you. Nobody's out to fuck you over. It's all on you, and I promise you that you will see promotions come faster, you will see job opportunities come faster, and then along those lines, and just to add to that, the two things I want to leave with people is, if you listen to my podcast, you get this kind of really direct conversation, but as I sign out, I say, remember that opportunities are everywhere. You just have to go get them. So you have to keep your head up, as you said earlier, and you got to go get them. So, success isn't going to come to anybody. Riches aren't going to come to anybody. Healthy relationships aren't going to come to anybody. You have to go get them. You got to cultivate them. You got to take risk. You got to be willing to lose. I stole food as a kid. Like I said, I know what absolute bottom is, so I'm not scared about it. And you got to overcome that risk. There's no time like now to do that thing that you're most concerned about, but you can't sit back. You got to go do it. And those opportunities, they are absolutely everywhere. You got to go get them.
Yes. Yes, that's so much true in that. You have to go get them, and then you have to keep working at them. Relationships, for example, if you aren't constantly working on having great relationships at work, at home, they just won't happen. They won't continue being great if you stop working at it, if you stop trying. So yes, great words of wisdom, Jerry, for the end of this interview. We had a little bit of technical glitches, but fuck it, it is what it is.
We got through it.
Yes, we got through it. And Jerry, I'm just so super grateful for you, not just being my guest, but just, because you are what you are, and I really appreciate you. I'm really grateful for everything that you are. I wish you nothing but the best on, on all your journey going forward, and with everything that you're doing for fellow entrepreneurs, for the entrepreneurial community. I'm really, really grateful that I had the opportunity to meet you, to speak with you on several occasions, and I hope that there will be more opportunities for us to talk in the future. But until then, happy Thursday. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy the weekend. I know you will be working tomorrow, as you are every single day. But yeah, thank you for being my guest and sharing everything with our audience.
Miha, I just can't thank you enough, and I'm not sure I deserve half of what you just said, but I will take it with as much humility as I can. And again, I appreciate everything that you've done and this relationship that you and I have. So thank you for having us on again, and until next time.
Take care.
All right, pal.
So, wow. Don't you just love it when we have guests like Jerry? The real and raw that's coming at you when you're listening to him, when there is no fluff, no BS, no fakeness. You can sense in his voice and everything that he's saying how he went through all of that, how he experienced all of that. Um, I really encourage everybody to watch this not once, but maybe twice, and give a shout out to Jerry. Reach out to him, say hi. He's really one of the few uh, good ones out there who is not fake, who is as raw and as real as it gets. And yeah, I just absolutely love him, and I'm so grateful for being able to have this relationship with him. And so I really hope that you guys can appreciate the interview in the way that it was meant to be. Yes, we didn't dive in a particular techie topic or something like that, but I truly believe that stories like this need to be shared, need to be heard, and we can learn so much more from that than from any textbook. So yeah, just so happy that I'm blessed with such an amazing network of people on the other side of the ocean, being able to be in touch and be connected with Jerry, being able to share his story with you lovely people of LinkedIn and lovely people of YouTube as well. And on Monday, we are back with another interview, another very interesting one. So I invite you all to be there with us. Until then, well, here in Europe, the first day is almost over. So I will say happy Friday to everybody tomorrow. Enjoy the weekend that's coming, and see you on Monday. Take care.